welcome to Learn to Live Stress-Free. This is Christine Wright with Dr. Robert Wright Jr., your go-to wellness coaches of www.stressfreenow.info. Today, Dr. Bob, the stress relief doctor, and I will be discussing the benefits of maintaining rapport in communication.
Audience, as you know, Christine and I are speakers, wellness coaches, and authors. Our passion includes sharing information and providing solutions to help you feel better now. We seek to be of service to you and to show you how to relax, reduce your stress, reduce your pain and anxiety so that you can live longer and play with your grandchildren.
Listeners, today Bob and I will be discussing the topic together. Now, Bob, you chose the subject of today's podcast. Would you explain what you mean by maintaining rapport in communication and share how that might affect relationships?
Thank you, Christine. Listeners, whether you know it or not, you're always communicating. Whether you're communicating interpersonally with another person or intrapersonally with yourself, there's always some type of communication taking place. And today I just want to deal with three aspects of rapport. Most of us know what rapport is and know how good it feels when you come into contact with either a person or an animal or even an environment that you feel in rapport with. So an example would be you walk into a room and all of a sudden you feel welcome, the environment is warm and inviting, and you are able to connect, because that's basically what we're talking about. When you have rapport with a person or situation, you are connecting at deep levels. So it's not just the words, but it's everything underlying the words and your experience. Now, the three aspects that I want to talk about in terms of rapport, the first is meaning, that when you have a communication, is the other person you're speaking to or the group you're speaking to, are they receiving the meaning that you are planning on delivering in your communication? So that would be the first thing, because whenever there is a mismatch or when meaning is different from one person to another in terms of context. So, for example, an easy example would be that I can think of is in Spanish, where the same word in one country is an okay word, or actually a good word, and then in another country, the same word, another Spanish-speaking country, it's quote-unquote bad word or profane. And so you would have to be careful. So the same thing in English, where in terms of meaning, in terms of rapport, that there would be this, that the meaning that you want would be conveyed. The second aspect is intent. I think this is actually a big issue, because does the person delivering the message have ill intent, or what type of intent, or good intent? And then the person receiving the message, what's their intent? And so, for example, I think we've all had this experience where we've said something to someone with very good intent, but they were in a bad mood, or they're just a negative person, and they received it in a way that was the opposite of our intention, because their intention was not congruent with ours. And then the third aspect is the outcome desired. So, whether you're in a friendship relationship, a business relationship, or, intimate relationship, at the end of the day, what we really want is the desired outcome in the communication. And so one of the things that we need to think about is how do we get there? And so that's not always easy, but by asking that meta-level question that, this is the outcome I want, by doing it this way, will it give me what I want, or do I need to go around? So, for example, a person has just mopped the floor, and in your excitement, you wanted to surprise them, and then you tracked up the floor. Well, that communication probably is not going to be well received because they just mopped the floor, no matter what surprise you may be delivering.
Bob, as I was listening to you, quite a few things came to mind. When you talked about meaning, I was so glad you brought in English, because it doesn't have to be Spanish or another language. So many times a word, it's not just from different English-speaking cultures that would have different meanings. Between us, we'll say a word and we have a different understanding of the meaning of that word. So communication is such a complex process. There's so many nuances and so many little bits and pieces and places where somebody can sort of get off track and break rapport. I know you and I, we've talked about it in our relationships, that when you say something, it means this, and when I say it, it means something else. I mean, one of the things you often talk about is, I would say, Bob, I want to talk. And to you, that means danger, danger, Will Robinson. And I'm like, well, Bob, I just mean I want to talk. How else am I going to say it? But you have a different expectation of that phrase than what I mean. And certainly,
well, Christine, that's because I have a different experience. When people said to me, I want to talk to you, that actually meant they had a bone to pick with me, and the bone didn't have any meat on it.
Exactly. And that's something we had to learn. And you've often said to me sometimes, I'm speaking volumes with my silence. You'll ask me something or say something, and then you just hear quiet, and I don't say anything to you. I'm not giving you words, so it's hard for you to figure out, oh, Christine's quiet. That actually means she has a question or she doesn't know. So I'm in thought trying to figure it out, and I'm not communicating it to you. So there are ways that rapport can be broken, communication can be lost, and I think that's where it comes to the point you bring up, which is so excellent, intent. What's your intent? And we've talked about this before, where a colleague and friend of ours said that it's obvious with us we have good intention. That's not always the case when people are communicating or interacting. But if you come out of the gate with good intention, you really have pretty much of the map or the game laid out.
Well, Christine, I'm just going to take that thread and pull that sleeve all the way off. That's a very excellent thing, because even in a close relationship, it's easy to say something to someone when you have good intentions, but the way it comes across, it feels like a puppy might experience a newspaper wrapped on the nose, that you're getting wrapped on the nose unceremoniously. And so I just want to use an example where in our relationship, it has developed over time that in the past, I have sometimes said something to you in a harsh kind of way, and I didn't even realize to you it's harsh. And I was like, well, look, it needs to get done right now. Get it done. And then depending on your state or whatever it is you were doing, you took that, even though my intention was well-meaning, I was just saying, Christine, this needs to be finished now. Okay, it's taking too long. It's been stretched out. And so that is not a good way, in hindsight, of motivating you to get that task done. I don't have to say, honey, blah, blah, blah. However, there is a way to speak to a person, and there's a way not to speak to a person. And so sometimes, depending on who you're interacting with, speaking in a rough kind of way is okay, but in another context, it is not.
Well, yes, that's one of the things that we have learned over time, and most likely other people experience it too, that it takes getting to know someone and their style. When are they joking? When are they serious? When are they angry? That, again, there's so many nuances and layers to communication. I think one of the things I've said to you from time to time is that we have to put grace into the equation, because the words don't always accurately and completely convey the meaning. And you can get into discord without meaning to, without having ill intent. So sometimes you just have to take a pause, take a break, and say, hey, this person is my friend. this person means me well. We're in a good space here, and we're just trying to find common ground in terms of meaning because we like each other, we respect each other, we're on the same page. And if that's not the case, well, that's a whole other story. That's a whole different scenario and situation if it is an adversarial relationship and if a person does not mean you well. But if we're working on the premise that you want to maintain rapport and to get your meaning across, then it's a good thing to say, take a pause, and let me just ask, what is it you really mean? Am I understanding you clearly? To just do a little check to see that, we're looking for this desired outcome.
Christine, I just want to segue in here that you mentioned a very key point about words and language. I have to find the original studies on this, but I recall seeing a couple of studies that pretty clearly showed that for the average person, the words only represented 7% of the actual communication. So that means that 93% of any communication is left out in the words. So I found that very shocking and actually disconcerting because, being a high auditory person, I think I was using almost like 50% of the meaning for me. And so I was getting into a lot of trouble with people because I said, but you said that. And they said, well, that was just a hot air, Bob, right? And so I often took people literally or at their word. And so, the old saw meaning what they say and saying what they mean really came into play. So I want to thank you for that. Christine, I just want to move right along and to this second issue, which is something that we have talked about extensively between us. I often repeat a phrase a coach of mine said to me, which was very insightful. She said that you want to make sure in any relationship that the other person has the same understanding that you may have of what the nature of the relationship might be. Now, I recall when she said that, shaking my head in agreement, but how many times have we done that? We get into trouble in situations because we say, oh, I thought she was my friend, or I thought he was my friend, or I thought this person was in my corner, and then come to find out that it's actually that the opposite, or that person's actually your nemesis, and they've been undercutting you and undermining you unbeknownst to you. So that is, I'd like you to address that issue and how difficult it is, in a regular situation. You just can't walk up to somebody and say, hey, are we on the same page with our friendship, and how's that working for you?
I think we probably should be able to walk up to someone and say that. I think so many times in relationships, people are afraid of offending someone or hurting someone. But there are times when you have to take the chance and ask a question or make a statement. It may seem gauche in the moment, but sometimes ask. I mean, there are times when people are holding a grudge or they have hurt feelings and they're not telling you, but they're acting strangely and you don't know what's going on or why. And they don't say, well, hey, the other day you did X, and they're still holding that grudge and you don't know. But going back to this point, or more clearly to this point of what your coach had said, if you think of it, you might have a feeling this person's your best friend, but in their mind, you're just an acquaintance. And what's their idea of a best friend? A best friend may be someone they talk to once a month, or a best friend may be someone they see every day and you go to the ball game with, you do activities with, you need to be physically close with, you spend a lot of time with. So it is a good idea in some way to make that check. It's not just in a romantic or a dating relationship, a friendship relationship, a business relationship. What are the, to use your language, Bob, what's the criteria? What are you looking for in a match? What are the deal breakers in any type of relationship? It's a good idea. Hey, if we have dinner once a week, that's great. If we see each other once a year, that's fine. If we have a conversation, once every 2 months. So it is helpful to know if you're on the same page in terms of how much time do you want to spend together, what are the activities you want to do, because I, too, have had different needs, expectations, wants, and desires than the person I was in a relationship with, and it never dawned on me to, hey, just explicitly discuss this. It can maybe be uncomfortable or seem strange, but if you want X and the other person wants Y, that's not a good basis for a successful relationship. And I think many of us, or some of us, will find ourselves in situations like that we think we're best friends with someone and they just think you're an acquaintance or an associate, or, hey, this is just someone I know.
Well, Christine, listening to what you said just took me back to a time when I first met you, years ago, and basically we became friends, and then our friendship evolved to a point where, we were just friends. We weren't dating, and in fact, we were saying just the opposite. We were. I can't imagine dating you, and you can't imagine dating me. And let's help each other find someone. And the thing is, there came a point in time where, because of the high level of sharing that we were doing, that we both came to the same point where we said, "Oh, I wonder what it'll be like for the person that we eventually end up with, how they'll be able to manage our relationship because of the emotional intimacy that we had developed in our friendship." And so, well, that question got answered very easily because I just married her, and then that was not an issue. We always laugh about
You know
that.
something, Bob? I want to come in here. I think this is very important. As you said, we weren't looking at each other as romantic partners, and I think if you look at it, there are quite a few movies that people get into these romances without realizing it. The basis of our relationship was friendship, was honesty, openness. What we both admired in each other was the level at which we were willing to share pertinent, significant information in an authentic way. And both of us, one of our pet peeves, if you will, were that there were people in our lives, families, friends, acquaintances, associates, that we had known for a very long time. We'd known other people for years, decades, and we knew less about them than we knew about each other in a short period of time.
In a week.
In a week. And there's a story that you and I often tell each other. I'm not sure if we've shared this with our listeners before. We were traveling, and we were in the parking lot, and we met a couple, and in 5 minutes, they shared their life story with us.
Oh, this is in New Jersey, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And they had the two kids in the car. They talked about their car. This car, the brand of this car is no good. They had the 3-year-old and the 5-year-old. They have to have different movies in the car. And it was we were just packing up to leave the hotel. It was a chance meeting. But they were so friendly, so open, and there was no risk or danger involved in sharing information. Whereas you and I, again, we've said we've known these people a long time, and we don't know anything about them. And
well, almost anything. We do know their names, we think.
So, in terms of relationship, it goes back to what your coach said. What is it that you want in your relationship? So it makes sense when you're with someone to have an idea of what is this going, because we do want to have clear boundaries, and we're not always telling everything to everyone all the time. What's the nature of the relationship, and how are we going to communicate? One of the things that one of the people I studied with, they talk about, and you and I use this again a lot, Bob, Michael Auger, he talks about having the same vibe, and if we had a meter on our head that could say that, we're on the same page, that how easy would it be if we could just look at somebody's forehead and there it says, whatever, friend or foe, vibrational match, not vibrational match. That would be make it so easy. Audience, Bob and I will be back in a moment to continue our discussion on rapport and relationships on Learn to Live Stress-Free.
Hi, I'm Dr. Robert Wright, Jr., the Stress Relief Doctor, co-host of the Learn to Live Stress-Free podcast series. I'm an author, speaker, and stress management wellness coach. My published study is the first to show the connection between stress reduction, grief recovery, nitric oxide spiking, and the relaxation response. And my practical application of this knowledge helps you relieve the stresses of everyday life. I have the tools to dissolve your pain points quickly and effectively. Email me to find out how you can start to feel better now at stressfreenow.info/contact. That's stressfreenow.info/contact. Have you been procrastinating about completing an important project or pursuing a treasured dream? Christine Wright specializes in helping her coaching clients to lay out clear, elegant strategies. She shows you how to quickly build your confidence to uncover and eliminate your habitual patterns of resistance and self-sabotage. Christine helps you discover those meaningful insights that will get you to do what works so you can celebrate your successes. Go to stressfreenow.info/contact to let Christine know that you're ready to live your ideal life now. Again, that's stressfreenow.info/contact.
Welcome back to Learn to Live Stress-Free as Dr. Bob and I discuss rapport and communication. Bob, you mentioned being auditory a moment ago, and again, we've talked about this. Both you and I have studied NLP, which is neuro-linguistic programming, and you and I have very different communication styles. And that's been an opportunity for growth. For those of you listening, quote unquote, that's that opportunity challenge of us growing and understanding each other and just developing our skill sets. Would you talk a little bit about how representational styles play into interpersonal communication?
Yes. Thank you, Christine. That is correct. In many ways, the default communication style that you have and that I have is actually opposite. However, because we're good-natured people, we've been able to work around that and then use the other modalities to figure out, okay, when you're talking, you're a square. When I'm talking, I'm a circle. And so we both know what a square and circle is. Those are just shapes. And so the issue is that how do we communicate so that both the intent and the meaning are delivered in a way such that it's received with the clarity that we're seeking. And so basically, audience, from an NLP perspective, there are four main styles. Visual style needs no explanation. A person is highly visual, and they have a preference for receiving information visually. Then there's auditory. A person's very sensitive to sound and the way and tonality, and auditory type word. A good way to know that you may have come across people who they may have a pet peeve that the word order or things being said properly, that might be an indication that they're high auditory, that where it bothers them, that when someone says, well, what difference does it make how I say it? Well, to an auditory person, it makes a lot of difference because it's discordant to them, and it can be to the point of, think of when the teacher would take the chalk and the fingernail scratched along the chalkboard. It's not a good feeling sense. Then there's kinesthetic. Those are people who have more of a feeling sense and, a high tactile people, and they like to touch things. And the last one is the digital, and it's actually, Christine, when I just finish, I'm going to ask you to elaborate on the digital style, because in the NLP literature, it's little talked about. I always refer to it as auditory digital, but you always correct me and say it's really just digital. And so digital people tend to prefer things that are logical, they need things sequential, and they have a preference for writing things down. So like a person would have like a diary system or a journal, or sometimes when complex information is being presented to them, they need to write it down and take notes, and so much more than some other styles. And so basically what we're talking about, the reason we're talking about these styles is because you can be automatically out of rapport with someone and have a bad outcome occur simply because you are not aware that the way you are presenting is having the opposite effect of what you want. Here would be an example. I recall having a video shot for a testimonial, and I asked a person who saw the video, well, what do you think? How was it? And the person who was giving me the feedback was a high visual person, and instead of giving me feedback on the video, all he could talk about was, well, when he came into the office, he looked grubby. And I remember being shocked at the time because the feedback was not about the video at all. He could not get past the fact that the gentleman had come in for a video shoot and looking in, I guess, with the 5 o'clock shadow. I think that, and now that's in style, but back then it was not. And so he could not process any more information or actually hear anything else other than this guy came in and he looked grubby. And so you could be in a negotiating situation, you could be in a relationship, and just because of your appearance, something that's a pet peeve for that person, it turns them off in a way that you cannot do any business with them, or you know, any transaction would be very painful because you have rubbed their fur the wrong way, and often it's unintentional. And so if you are unfamiliar with a personal style, obviously you're in a situation you're not looking to make people angry, but being aware that, for example, that someone is high auditory and you're playing the music very loud without, say, mentioning it to them, and that may be what's loud to you. It's not that loud, but because you're not auditory, but to an auditory person, it may be very loud. And then because now they've had that spike like that in the sound, that's automatically put them in a bad mood. And then instead of the answer being yes, which you might have gotten, now it's a no. Or maybe just because of the mismatch in style. And so there's no time to go into how a person could be more aware of, more cognizant of the style that's different from them. I want to close on this. It's easy to know when you have a match because it feels good. Like if you walk into a room and then, you know, you start high-fiving and chest bumping or everything is smooth, then it's pretty obvious you are in rapport with people. If you walk into the room and the hair goes up on the back of your neck and then everybody stops talking and then somebody drops the crystal bowl, well, most likely you are not in sync and not in rapport. And so the bottom line is that, you know, when we go out, we're looking to get good results. Most of us, not everyone is looking to get good results. And so, and also what is good result for one person may be a bad result for another person. So, but we're talking about the win-win because that's where we're coming from. And so, audience, just want you to be aware there are 4 main styles: visual, auditory, kinesthetic, and auditory digital. And that in another podcast, we will go into more depth into what those are and the modalities that are attached to them. But for now, just be aware that sometimes you're talking to someone and you don't have their attention because they're visual and they don't like the shirt that you have on, or there's something happening behind them visually, and so they're not paying attention to you. Or auditory, or the person's a feeling person and you're using words that don't connect with a feeling person who's kinesthetic.
Bob, you said something that I think is important. I'd like to highlight that we have this indicator, how we feel, and if we more often go with our gut, if you will, go with our instinct, our intuition, that's really a very good measure of, is this working, is this not working? Because we might tend to intellectualize and just be quote unquote trying too hard, when, say, if it doesn't feel good, this is not working, let's take a break. And in terms of the representational style, I think it's great that we know so much more about it, and this knowledge and information is becoming more widespread. I just want to mention we're talking about it in communication here, but certainly in education, teaching methods are paying more attention to learning styles of, having the video, having the audio, having the tools that a student can manipulate. And certainly we've seen how this is used in sales to attract people and to, hook their attention. So it's the same thing in communication. If we know that someone is kinesthetic, for example, they need hugs and they need touching. And when you notice it, that's part of enhancing the communication. If you know someone's visual, they're not going to be using as many words or language as someone who's auditory like Bob. So their eyes may start to glaze over after the first sentence because they're more bullet point people. Bob is great on ideas, and someone will ask me a question and it seems like, hey, is anybody home? But it may seem like I'm not interested, but I'm taking time to think about all the possibilities and the permutations, so I may seem a little bit slower. But what it is I'm looking at things in more detail. So when you know those things about different styles, that can help you to put that little grace in the equation of how you communicate. When you know what will help someone or help you to maintain rapport and keep those good feelings going so that you can have a good communication.
Well, Christine, I think you hit on a really, really important point here. I believe Michael Loge has actually done a couple of Google Hangout shows where he nailed this issue, and so I just want you to touch briefly on that. For example, I recall you saying in terms of decision making, if you want a fast decision, the worst thing you could do is to ask an auditory digital person. So could you just lay that out for our audience so they get a better sense of what we're talking about, the practical implications, that the benefits of knowing if you're working on a team or you're in a relationship, and like for example, Christine does not like to be rushed. I could tell you from personal experience. If you rush her, that is like rubs her fur the wrong way. And especially if, and then she would say, well, if you had listened to me and done and we had implemented the planning that I talked about, there wouldn't be any need for rushing. So she's doubly put off because the issue was discussed and this could have been taken care of. And then so don't, like in the Little Rascals, it said, don't rush me, big boy.
And Bob, I think this is a matter of playing to your strengths, right? Knowing a person, you may not know their representational style, but if you think of it, you'll say, oh, if I need this done, I'll go to this friend because this friend has this high skill or high aptitude for X. So that's what this is. The auditory person is usually just a flow, in Bob's language, is a fire hydrant of ideas. A visual person is going to come into a room and say, oh, this could go here, this could go that, and they'll see there's a quickness about it. Whereas my style, the digital style, I'm looking at layers. One of the examples Bob and I used, I saw something on a website and I said, no, this is missing here, and I was quiet and I was looking and thinking, and because I was in my head thinking and I wasn't verbalizing, he's like, what's going on? And he didn't see what I saw. And then when we checked with the person, they said, oh, yes, we know this is missing and we know it needs this. So my mind was extrapolating it. But while I was doing that, I wasn't talking, and there was this seemingly long pause and silence. So my style tends to work that way. And one of the things that Michael Loge does very well is on his Google Hangouts, his coaches, he has a coach that's each style, and they describe. So that would be a great thing to look and see it in action. And it's not about being wrong or right. It's just a difference and a preference. And once we know that, we can really just be more at ease with ourselves and each other.
Great, Christine. As we begin to wrap up the show, I wanted to touch on this point, which we have over the years, this thing keeps coming up again and again and again, and we keep seeing it. How does location and proximity play into the communication rapport, and specifically in relationships with families, friends, coworkers, etc., that some people seem to be able to handle a distance relationship. Other people seem to require proximity to maintain contact. Can you discuss that?
Yes, I think that's something that I had been aware of or noticed at a subconscious level, that, hey, why is my friendship with this person this way and my friendship with another person the other way? And it seems to me to be the same thing. But, and it's occurring to me now in this way, that someone is kinesthetic, they're going to need more of a physical presence and interaction than someone who's visual or auditory. So there are most likely many factors that play into it: character, personality, preference, whether someone's an introvert or an extrovert, but some people need more physical interaction than others to maintain any type of continuity or intimacy in a relationship. One of the things that Bob and I talk about often is that someone who was a great friend in elementary school or high school or in this particular job or this particular time, the minute that is over, the friendship or association ends, and then you say, was this really a friendship? That it was situational. It was never going to be long-term. That it was dependent on these other factors that you were not aware of in the moment. You're great friends on the job, but the minute the job is over, there's nothing left. You were great friends in this club or this place, but outside of that, there's nothing. And there's so many times people talk about relationships, especially romances. You go someplace, you meet someone, and there's a long-distance romance, and you can do it, some people, for just so long, and then it fizzles out. Or some people can do it longer, or you decide, you know what, I need to move to California, or they need to move to New York, but this going back and forth and seeing each other just doesn't work. It doesn't help a sense of connection or continuity or growth.
Christine, I remember we were on vacation and we met a gentleman, and we had this kind of conversation. He was describing the friends that he had in the gym, the friends he had at the bar, and the friends he had in his church. And I remember asking him, I said, well, do you, because he was complaining that the relationships weren't satisfying, although he knew all these people, and it was just contextual, situational. So I said, well, did you ever try crossing these boundaries? You know, somebody from the gym, you played tennis with them outside of the gym, or you went to the bar. And he said, oh, gosh, I tried that. Oh, no. And so what was very striking about that conversation, he says, when I go to the gym, everybody is named Mac. He says, when I go to the bar, everybody's named Mac. I assume at his job he knew a few names. But, Christine and I looked at each other and we were saying how tragic and sad. And, at least the gentleman, he realized he had a gap in his life, but how unsatisfying is that? This is beyond that just surface type thing. And so, this is unfortunately something that happens all too often. So in any event, the point is that in terms of location, for some people, proximity is the number one issue. If they have proximity and there's some other reason to be there, you're going to the same school, you're working on the same job, or you're at the same party, then there's that connection. But outside of that, and so that's something just to think about, and it goes back to our original question in terms of, are you on the same page? Are we on the same page? And the larger question actually is the more important question: should we be on the same page? Should I even be talking to you? Because in hindsight, and this is a painful thing to realize, there are certain people that perhaps you shouldn't be talking to, or you wish if you had enough information, you wouldn't be talking to them.
And I think, Bob, it's important to mention this point. everybody doesn't like everybody, and that's okay. We can treat each other well and treat each other with respect, but if we don't share enough or significant common values and interests, then we don't have a foundation, a very solid foundation for a continued relationship. So I think that lends itself to why certain relationships are situational, that it is just about business, because I like this sport, you like that sport. There's just not a lot of common ground. So that's okay. And you just can be polite and amicable. But if you were looking for a deeper, more meaningful relationship, it makes sense to review a couple of checkpoints. It doesn't have to be a formal sit-down interview, but we know over time when we meet someone and as we share experiences and conversation, what do we like, what don't we like, what are the deal breakers? And those points that you mentioned initially, Bob, about meaning and good intention and outcomes, if we check those things, then we know, we're okay with a long-distance relationship, or no, we need to see each other fairly often for me to feel good in the relationship and for me to grow in the relationship, or we can have a very intimate relationship long distance for a long time. So I think there is some need, Bob, although you said it would seem a little odd, to have these checks of, do we want the same thing? And if we don't want the same thing or don't agree on things, that's okay. We'll say hello, but we don't have to spend a whole lot of time with each other.
I think, as I was told once, move on. Listeners, thank you so very much for spending this time with Christine and me.
So, listeners, we want to thank you for joining Bob and me today as we discussed communication rapport. And remember, to learn more about what we do and the services that we offer, go to www.stressfreenow.info. You can subscribe to our newsletter and podcast. You can listen to our past interviews, read our articles and our blog posts. We also offer individual coaching, and we're available for keynote speaking and stress management and wellness training. So again, our website is stressfreenow.info. That's .info. Or you can give us a call at 954-900-2179.
Christine, what final thoughts or key ideas do you have for our audience today?
I would like to say that while there may be a risk in relationship, that it's worth it. I think so many of us long for connection and intimacy. Take that chance. Be authentic. Share truly and deeply with someone. Of course, you want to be emotionally safe, physically safe in any relationship or any communication. You don't want to divulge private information or personal information to anyone without developing trust. But it's worth sharing something of import to develop intimacy, and it's worth taking that chance to have a friendship, connection, or love. And it's also important, I think, to just have clear boundaries of what's acceptable and not acceptable, and for you to know that when you go into a communication or a relationship. So, Bob, likewise, I'd like to ask you, what final thoughts would you like to share with our audience?
My final thought is this. While rapport is a wonderful thing, sometimes it's not possible to achieve rapport. And in those cases, it's important to move on. Having clarity in terms of what you are doing and what you want, and once you figure out the intention of the other person, it's not always good. So in those cases, if you find yourself in a deal breaker situation, move on.
Thank you, Bob.
So audience, I want to thank you for listening, and I want to thank you for joining us today, wherever you are and whatever time zone you're in right now. We want to let you know that we so much appreciate your presence and trust that you'll benefit in some unique way from the information that we delivered on today's show. Of course, as usual, we always welcome and look forward to receiving your comments about our show. Please let us know if there are any additional topics you'd like to see us cover, or if there's a guest you enjoyed whom you'd like us to invite back. Please contact us through our website with your feedback and suggestions. Remember, listeners, if you'd like to experience the same benefits our coaching clients get with us, including learning how you can get more results in your day and easy ways to dissolve your stress, your chronic pain, and anxiety, then give us a call at 954-900-2179. Mention that you heard our Stress Free Now podcast show, and you'll receive a free gift from us. Call or email us to see how we can help you. For Christine Wright, this is Dr. Robert Wright, Jr. of www.stressfreenow.info. Until next time, be safe and be well.